about their toothbrushes before, their flossers, and but also their gum, which is fantastic. Gum, apparently the unsung hero when it comes to better oral health. The American Dental Association recommends chewing sugar-free gum for 20 minutes after meals. Did you know that, Emma? No.
No, I did not. Sorry, I was on mute.
Don't want you to hear me. Years ago that Quip reinvented the toothbrush for our modern age, as you know. Well, they've done it again, this time for chewing gum. Quip's new gum is actually good for your oral health, and it comes in a dispenser that'll remind you of like those little Pez things. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but it does. You just, you bang the top of it, shoots out right into your mouth. My kids love that. I love it. And I can keep my gum in my pocket for days on end, and I don't have to worry about any type of lint in there. I'm not going to get into it too much, but I can take it. I can coach Little League Baseball, and I have to worry about the gum getting mushed and squished. Gum can help you prevent cavities. It can freshen your breath when chewed for, like I say, for 20 minutes after eating. And this gum has got like a mint flavor. It's crunchy, tri-level layered design, all made and provided in a reusable, hygienic dispenser. Paired Quip with the electric toothbrushes they have, their gum, their flosser that I love, and you know that Quip also delivers their fresh brush heads, floss, and toothpaste refills every 3 months from $5. So shipping is free. You can save money and skip the store. If you go to getquip.com/majority right now, you get a free plastic dispenser with any refill plan of the gum. Check it out. That's a free dispenser at getquip.com/majority, spelled GETQUIP.com/majority. Quip, the good habits company. All right. Want to welcome to the program the senior correspondent, editor at large, one of the co-founders of The Intercept, Jeremy Scahill. Welcome back to the program.
It's great to be with you. Thanks so much, Sam.
It's been a long time, Jeremy. Good to see you. I'm here with Emma Vigland.
Hey, Hi, Jeremy. How are you?
Good.
So this is, I want to talk about a little bit what's going on today with Biden, particularly in terms of his record for the last 4 months and but recently. But you have put together an incredibly comprehensive record of Joe Biden's sort of various stances when it comes to American military power and its deployment and our involvement around the world. And also, I got to say, it's a great sort of history of the past 50 years of American, of the same, more broadly speaking. And so let's start with the top line, because one of the things I found fascinating about this is that my perception of Joe Biden from those years has been that he had a fairly consistent position on foreign policy that was different from like domestically, where he just sort of is more tactical than principled in some way. And that's not the case, is it?
No, I mean, in fact, I think it's really important just to start with a couple of early points about how Biden got into the Senate and sort of his worldview at the time, because it's really revelatory. I have to say, I learned a tremendous amount about Joe Biden. And, you know, on a big level, I have to say, for all the talk, and I think it's true, for all the talk of how the Joe Biden of today is not the Joe Biden from 5 years ago and certainly not the Joe Biden from 50 years ago, Joe Biden's career paints a picture of an incredibly crafty politician who is a master at playing all sides at once, messaging in public based on which way the wind is blowing, negotiating in private. And I'll give you an example from very early on. Biden runs for office in 1971-72, at a time when the Nixon administration is operating in an utterly lawless manner, both domestically and around the world. Nixon hasn't yet fully been unmasked to be the kind of criminal as commander-in-chief that we now see him as. But Biden runs on a platform of opposing the Vietnam War, but not for any moral reasons. In fact, Joe Biden spoke in very disparaging terms about anti-war activists that he encountered on his campus in law school. He called them a-holes. He said that he isn't a big fan of flak jackets himself. He had multiple deferments, and ultimately his handlers fumbled through an explanation that something about asthma with Joe Biden prevented him from serving in Vietnam. But Sam, what Biden does is he stakes out a position not so different from the one that Barack Obama took in 2002 when he opposed the Iraq war. You know, Obama said he opposes dumb wars, but he didn't say he opposes all wars or that he's a pacifist. So Biden crafts this position where he's against the Vietnam War because he said it was kind of foolish and that it was tactically unsound. And that really would speak to a lot of Biden's decision-making and posturing on U.S. war powers. He almost never expresses concern about the killing of non-American soldiers in U.S. wars. He's very much rooted in this notion that America's the shining city on the hill, and that he is an American exceptionalist whose main priority is what's in our economic and geopolitical interest, what can we do without causing major numbers of American troops to be killed, but morality doesn't play a role in Joe Biden's perspective on U.S. wars.
But to further that, is his practicality as he applies it to the questions of war, is that really just a surrogate for his practicality in terms of his political career? In other words, is he making these assessments based upon like, I'm just I'm a realist and I'm looking at these things and this doesn't make sense for us to engage in and that does? Or is he looking at what the political climate is and say like, how can I sort of like ride both sides of the top of the roof, as it were?
I think to an extent, Joe Biden's public posturing is about the political dimensions that you're outlining. I also think that he has long thought of himself as an imperial senator who plays a key behind-the-scenes role in projecting American power and trying to negotiate what he believes is the best deal for the empire. Let's just be blunt about it. But here's a really interesting strand of Joe Biden's history that extends to this minute and started in 1973. Biden ends up on a subcommittee in 73 that is examining the War Powers Act, and the battle between the outrageously lawless Nixon administration spying on American citizens, deploying the CIA inside of the United States, waging secret components to the overt war in Vietnam. And Biden ends up as a co-sponsor in 73 of what I would argue is the most consequential piece of legislation that asserts Congress's right to declare war and not the White House's right to declare war. And so from 1973 to 1991, Joe Biden just rails against any attempts by the executive to violate the War Powers Act, although Biden himself supports numerous military actions by Reagan that are done in explicit violation of the War Powers Act. He supports the 1986 attempt to assassinate Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. He starts flirting with supporting the Contra death squads in Nicaragua if we put this restriction or that restriction on it. But the key moment to understand here, Sam, is in 1990, George H.W. Bush makes it clear that the United States is going to go to war against Iraq following the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, which, by the way, and this is a parenthetical, the U.S. ambassador to Iraq at the time reportedly told Saddam Hussein that the U.S. didn't have a position on an Arab-Arab dispute. I mean, it's a footnote of history now, but it is an important fact to always remind people of because a lot of people forget that happened. Right. So Saddam Hussein was a client of the United States at the time. He was viewed as an important ally in the war against the Islamic Republic of Iran, and the United States was financing and arming both sides in that conflict, but overwhelmingly, disproportionately financing Saddam Hussein. So George H.W. Bush, former, CIA director, understands very well the geopolitics at play, and they decide that Saddam Hussein is now tantamount to Hitler and that the United States needs a great, successful, easy war to kind of throw off the albatross around the neck that was the Vietnam War defeat. The United States was militarily defeated in Vietnam, and no one to this day wants to acknowledge that. So Biden
go ahead. If I could just add a little more context here too, is that I think there was also an awareness from a domestic political sense that there was a new generation. In fact, what Clinton ultimately, ran on was this, the post-Vietnam generation, as it were, the people who did not go into that war. And I think that was part of, at least from the political end of things, part of the motivation of George Herbert Walker Bush and his administration to get beyond that, they called it the Vietnam syndrome, I think it was. And that was a big part of it. And I want to add, just since we're here, in addition to the fact that our ambassador, to Iraq essentially said, go ahead. I mean, that's what the message was. Like, we don't have a problem here. We deployed our own ambassador, who I guess it was daughter or somebody was testifying to Congress that the Iraqis had come in and essentially killed babies in incubators.
In Kuwait, yeah. It was actually, and this was all orchestrated by a powerful American public relations firm. I believe it was a relative of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States. And the whole thing was an utter fraud. You have what appears to be this gut-wrenching testimony from a very young woman describing Iraqi troops coming into the hospital and tossing, premature babies from incubators. And it turns out the entire thing was not only a lie, but a lie orchestrated on a government contract with a public relations firm from the United States. So, yeah, I mean, the war of lies was incredible in the lead up to the ultimate war that the United States waged against Iraq, the so-called First Gulf War. But Joe Biden, and I give him credit for this because he staked out a position that was politically a tough one for him to stake out. He basically said George H.W. Bush is acting like a monarchist, and he refuses to acknowledge any role for Congress in determining whether the American people should be dragged into a war. And he raises hell privately, publicly, on the floor of the Senate, demanding that the White House comply with the War Powers Resolution that Biden was a player in creating. And he gets so offended with the way that George H.W. Bush is talking about Congress that he ultimately says, I'm voting against this. And Biden does vote against it. And he takes a lot of hell for that. In fact, his political career could have been in real jeopardy as a result of that vote, particularly if it was at a different point in history. I mean, Biden was basically trying to craft a reputation for being a tough liberal in the U.S. Senate, a Democrat who was tough on foreign policy, but asked the right questions and would speak out when necessary. So he stands up against this war on grounds that the White House is acting like it's a monarchy or, that Bush is an emperor. And it's a political disaster for Joe Biden. The war was perceived to be a success. Now, I don't think that war was a success. You don't think that war was a success. It was the beginning of a mass slaughter campaign in Iraq that endures to this day. But Biden almost immediately realizes he's made a political mistake. And so he ends up voting in favor of a resolution to heap praise on George H.W. Bush and then Defense Secretary Dick Cheney. And you see almost overnight, Sam, Joe Biden become not just a hawk on Iraq, but one of the most hawkish people on Iraq in the United States Congress. And he supports Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush imposing the most draconian regime of economic sanctions, the longest sustained bombing campaign since Vietnam that was waged under Bill Clinton. Biden pushes through the Iraq Liberation Act, which codified regime change as the official policy of the United States in the 1990s. This was before 9/11. Then 9/11 happens and Biden goes all in with the Bush people. He helps facilitate passage of the Patriot Act, claims it was inspired by his legislation in the 90s, that some parts of it are verbatim taken from his plans. And it's true. I mean, Biden's not lying about that. He was a very right-wing guy when it came to many civil liberties and crime questions, but he wanted credit for that. And then finally, Sam, as chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, when the war in Iraq was being debated, Joe Biden basically used his chairmanship of that committee to facilitate a discussion of, should we invade them with ground troops or should we just bomb them back to the 8th century? I mean, Biden was a key Democrat. He didn't just vote for that war, Sam. He helped facilitate it, and he himself promoted lies about weapons of mass destruction.
But then that initial impulse, I just didn't want to move past it, where he was essentially offended by the White House's posture towards Congress. I feel like informs a lot of his decision making, where he's